Welcome to my complete early access review of Void. Void was temporarily granted to me through Kabam's content creator program. I've spent over 20 hours and a whole mess of units swapping around mastery builds, all in an attempt to answer one question. Is this finally the science champion we've all been waiting for? Perhaps even a champion worth going for in the featured 5-star crystal? Or is this champion just another century in disguise? At first glance, looking at Void's stats, I'm really not too impressed. He has an extremely high health pool and high block proficiency, but only average crit stats, and even worse, a below average attack rating. The last thing we need in MCOC, especially for the science class, is another wet noodle. Prestige-wise, at rank 5, he's up there near the top of the list, capping out at 10,260. It's not too bad, actually. And it turns out that his low attack can actually be massively boosted by his Awaken ability, and even a potential 250% Fury passive that lasts for 20 seconds when paired with a unique synergy. Alright, Void, you got my attention. Let's see what else you can do. While Void does have some heavy-hitting potential, and I'm going to come back to that later, the first thing that I want to talk about is what makes Void unique, which is his utility. And you don't even need any synergies to take advantage of his full utility set, making him a potential option to be used in something like Alliance War Attack when you really can't bring those synergies. Check out how well he does versus Ant-Man in Act 5 that has the Buffet node active. Buffet heals the enemy when you gain a buff, which is very annoying since it includes the dexterity buff as well. But not only can Void stop the healing completely, he can actually reverse that healing to deal damage instead, making every well-timed swipe a massive blow to the enemy's health pool. Now, unfortunately, the content creator program prohibits using these temporarily granted champions in competitive game modes like Alliance War, so I was not able to test this versus node 24, which of course is one of the most brutal nodes on the entire map. But in the right hands, I can see high potential for Void to crush this node. But how does this healing reversal thing work anyway? Well, Void has this ability called Intimidating Presence that applies one of 3 debuffs every 10 to 14 seconds. Void also applies one of these 3 debuffs every time he uses his Special 1 ability. The 3 debuffs are Agility debuff, which reduces the enemy's ability to evade by 30%, which actually includes evasion from the Dexterity Mastery as well. He has a Fatigue debuff that reduces the enemy's crit chance, and he also has a Petrify debuff, which is this nice little swirly do icon here, that reduces the effectiveness of power gain and regeneration by 50%. This is really what makes Void. This is the biggest and most important debuff in most cases. The other ones are nice too, though. Each of these debuffs can stack twice, meaning that you can reduce power gain and regeneration buffs by 100%. But wait a minute. Reduces it by 100%. Doesn't that just stop the healing? Is it a bug that the healing gets reversed? Nope. Healing and certain abilities that counter healing work in kind of a funny way in Marvel Contest of Champions. It goes like this. Without any abilities or masteries to prevent healing, the enemy heals for 100% of the value. Then you have abilities that can reduce healing, like the Despair Mastery. Despair reduces healing by up to 15% per debuff, which can reduce the enemy's healing to 0%, meaning they heal for 0. Then you have abilities like Void and Guillotine that push this value below 0% into the negatives, causing them to heal for negative numbers, which means they're actually taking damage. The best part is that the Despair Mastery and these abilities can work together. For example, when Guillotine is used against Wolverine, it appears as though she just takes whatever positive healing is there and puts a negative on it. But in my testing, I found that what actually appears to be happening is that she lowers healing by 200%, which gives the same result of negative 100% healing, or the effect of reversed healing, but if you lowered that healing by 15% through the Despair Mastery first, Wolverine doesn't just take negative 85% of the base healing as damage, but instead he takes negative 115%. But let's go back to Void. Void naturally applies multiple debuffs to the enemy, allowing you to shut down healing with just the Despair Mastery. Then, after you apply the negative 100% healing from the Petrify debuff, suddenly the enemy is now taking damage from heals. And this works especially well if the enemy has willpower, which would normally allow them to heal for a small percentage of their life for each unique debuff. Well, now in this case, they're going to be taking a small percentage of their life as damage instead. But wait, it gets better. Let's talk about Void's Awaken ability. Each of the Intimidating Presence debuffs caps at 2, and when all 3 are capped out, they turn into a passive debuff that lasts for 40 seconds and can't be nullified. This ability is known as Fear of the Void. Fear of the Void does a few things. Number 1, it combines and retains the full debuff values from all of the Intimidating Presence debuffs that were stacked up. Number 2, you gain a massive attack boost, which at high sig levels doubles your attack rating for the full 40 seconds. And number 3, when Fear of the Void is active, Intimidating Presence debuffs are generated much faster, 50% faster at signature 99. That's right, even though Fear of the Void is already reducing healing by 100%, you can continue to stack Petrified debuffs and further take the enemy's healing and power gain into the negatives. Up until this point, I've only been showing the effects that this debuff has on healing, but this swirly Petrified debuff actually works the exact same way with power gain buffs. That's right, not only can you stop their power gain, but you can actually take it into the negatives, causing their power meter to go down. It's only for power gain effects though, so they can still gain power from hitting and being hit, however, so just be careful of that. But guess what? Mystic Dispersion counts as power gain and actually causes the enemy to lose power instead of gaining power. Finally, a real counter to Mystic Dispersion, although I do have to warn you, there is some ramp up time with Void, so to actually reverse the power, it's going to take some time, but you should be able to shut down the power of the enemy within a reasonable amount of time. It even works against OG Vision's Synthesize ability and will completely shut it down or even reverse the effect. This Vision in 5.2.3 with Power Reserve was super annoying when I first cleared this quest, but Void made it easy. Now to be clear, there is some build-up time when playing with Void, but it's a build-up time that happens automatically and doesn't really require as much skill as keeping combo with Star-Lord or Gwenpool, or building up charges with Stark Spidey. It's really a different kind of build-up. You either just fight like normal, or when going up against power gain nodes, just play a little bit passively. And oh yeah, I kind of forgot to mention that for every single debuff on the enemy, they're going to be suffering from degen damage as well. For a single debuff, it's not the biggest deal in the world, and you're not going to be dealing that much damage. But Void doesn't just apply one debuff, he's applying multiple debuffs, and this can actually add up to be quite a bit of damage. The enemy suffers degen from all debuffs too, not just the ones that are in Void's toolkit, including things like the Resonate Mastery or stuns from a parry, or when you include the Hulk and Black Widow synergy. I really enjoy how Void is designed in this sense, because if you're going up against a Void, and you have one debuff on you, you're not going to instantly get wiped out as if you were taking limbo damage. However, when you're playing Void and you're able to apply multiple debuffs, the degen damage is actually pretty damn good, especially after you activate Fear of the Void, even just for this 4-star that I'm working with. The best part is that it allows you to deal damage without needing to touch the enemy while you wait for these debuffs to kick in. This is super important in situations like this Hyperion fight that has increased power gain on it, where each one of my attacks is feeding the meter much more than I'm comfortable with, but the degen damage doesn't feed the meter at all, so I'm able to get in a decent amount of damage while just kind of playing passively and avoiding his abilities. The same thing when fighting Mordo. If he decides to turtle up in the corner and gain power, I don't really care. First off, I'm going to be applying a debuff that's going to either reduce or reverse that power gain. And second, guess what, man? I can just sit back and deal some passive damage as well. So I'm really not too worried about it. And that's really what I think the best part about Void is that he's kind of this complicated champion where he has a lot going on, but he's not complicated to play. Everything just kind of happens automatically when you're playing with Void, and allows you to focus on the enemy's abilities rather than trying to figure out what the optimal rotation is when playing with Void. And unlike champions that apply poisons or bleed, no champion is immune to degeneration damage. The only thing to be careful of is that debuffs can be shrugged off by champions that will prevent that degen damage, like Agent Venom and Kingpin. Also, while fighting against Void, every 10 hits in the combo meter will actually remove one of these debuffs, allowing a skilled player to counter Void if you put him on defense. But he still has defensive potential, which we'll get to in just a bit. Going back to immunities for a second, it's important to note that Void can suffer from both bleed and poison. However, he is fully immune to incinerate, and this immunity combined with class advantage makes him an excellent counter for Mephisto if you're in the market for one. Void is actually a pretty smooth champion that really doesn't take all that long to get used to. 10 minutes of fighting in Realm of Legends is really all it's going to take to get a good feel for the champion. That said, Void does have two main playstyles, and one is slightly more complicated than the other. You either play full utility style with decent damage, or you go full damage style with decent utility. The full utility style is as simple as spamming your special 1 as fast as possible, no synergies needed. This is likely how you'll be using the champion in game modes like Alliance War and regular questing. The full damage style allows Void to be a decent option for long fights like Realm of Legends, but it's slightly tricky to get going, and it does rely on getting the biggest Fury boost from Void's Special 3 while having Sentry on the team for synergy. Let me break it down for you. Void's synergy with Sentry gives him a buff that allows him to extend the duration of all Fury effects by 20 seconds after using Void's Special 3. And if we look at Void's Special 3, it gives a Fury boost depending on how many unique debuffs the enemy is suffering from. But normally, this Fury boost has no duration to it, and without the Sentry synergy, it's just a boost for the Special 3 itself. That's why the Sentry synergy must be active for this to work. It's also important to note that I don't think it's even worth it unless you can activate the biggest Fury boost, which requires 5 unique debuffs at the time of Special 3 activation. A unique debuff essentially means a different debuff icon. So if a single debuff is applied multiple times, this actually only counts as one unique debuff, similar to how the Willpower Mastery works. It's also important to note that the Resonate Mastery makes getting 5 debuffs significantly easier, since Void can get 3 quickly on his own, plus 1 with Resonate, plus 1 with a parry stun. If you do everything correctly, you'll be hitting like a truck. This is especially powerful if you can activate this Fury boost along with Void's other attack boost from his signature ability. And you'll definitely notice a boost in the amount of degen damage that you're applying to the enemy as well. Void also has a synergy with Hulk that allows you to charge up your heavy and gain up to 60% Fury for 8 seconds, which gets extended to 28 seconds when paired up with this Sentry synergy. But to be perfectly honest, I really hate this way of gaining Fury. It's a slow charge up, similar to Kamala Khan's, making it far too risky and not worth it in my opinion. If it was fast like Mordo's or had some protection like Quake's heavy charge, then it would actually be useful. And I'd love to see Kabam keep improving this heavy charging mechanic, but until that happens, I recommend avoiding the synergy with Hulk. I think Kabam missed a real opportunity here to make Void an even more unique champion than he already is. And what I would have preferred, instead of gaining a Fury effect while charging up his heavy, would be to just make the debuffs that he applies faster while charging up that heavy instead. Not only do I think that this would make the champion a bit more fun and unique to play, but I think it would also help out with that initial ramp-up time. So Kabam, if you're listening, if you ever do decide to add some further customization that you guys hinted at in the past, maybe consider adding something like this for Void. So to recap these two playstyles, if you want to go full utility, no synergies are needed, and you spam Special 1. If you want to go max damage, then bring the Sentry synergy and put at least 1 point to the Resonate Mastery. You're going to be doing a combination of mostly Special 3s, but a few Special 1s mixed in there as well to build up those initial debuffs. But it's the Special 3s that give you that massive Fury boost. And what's great about Void is that neither is completely lacking in damage or utility, since both playstyles apply debuffs, and even without a big Special 3 Fury boost, you still gain a strong attack boost from Void's signature ability. At this point, you may have noticed that I didn't mention the Special 2 for either of these playstyles. And the Special 2, while it hits pretty hard and can be used for a killing blow, other than that, I found it hard to use with either of these preferred ways to play Void. But for completeness' sake, let's talk about it. The Special 2 applies 2 Dark Sting debuffs, and these Dark Stings activate when the enemy uses a special ability similar to Yellow Jacket's stings. Except with Void, when these stings are activated, each sting applies a weakness or degen debuff for 20 seconds. Personally, I just didn't find the Special 2 to be all that useful, since the Special 1 will apply the debuffs that get you into Fear of the Void faster, and the Special 3 will allow you to get that massive Fury boost, which trumps the damage that the Special 2 is going to be doing for you. As I said though, it does hit pretty hard, so there are going to be those few times where you are going to bust out the Special 2. There's one more unique synergy that can really turn Void into a powerhouse and eliminate the ramp-up time, which is one of Void's few downsides. Void has a synergy with certain Avengers that allows his Fear of the Void signature ability to be active right at the start of the fight. This only works against Avengers, similar to how Blade gains danger senses against villains with the Ghost Rider synergy, but when it works, oh man, it is extremely powerful. With this synergy, Void starts the fight dealing practically double his damage, stopping all power gain effects, such as Synthesize, shuts down healing, and even reduces the chance for the enemy to evade. It's just too bad that there aren't really too many Avengers that you'll come across in Alliance War defense, Since most of the Avengers in this game, they're kind of fairly easily countered anyway, even without this Fear of the Void debuff. But who knows what's going to happen in the future. Maybe the next super ridiculous defender is going to be an Avenger, and if you have Void, you'll be ready for that day. Plus, there's more to this game than just Alliance Wars, so you might find this synergy to be pretty useful out there somewhere. But this synergy does have use even in today's Alliance Wars. Take a look at what the Avengers gain. They gain plus 15% attack, which is especially nice if you decide to pair up Void with someone like OG Vision, who has a somewhat lacking damage output and can definitely benefit from this extra attack boost. The last noteworthy synergy Void has goes back to his synergy with Hulk. Hulk gains 1 bar of power when below 20% health. Now imagine catching someone off guard with a Hulk on defense, and out of nowhere, Hulk gets a special 3. That person is dead instantly, pretty much. Diversity is still deciding wars, so finding a way to get in unique champions that can actually get some kills is a pretty big deal. And I'm not saying that you would always get a kill from this, but the potential is there at least. The only problem is that synergies seem to be bugged for defenders at the moment, but Kabam is looking into it. As for Void's defensive potential, well, I think on the right node he could pose a problem, since the way to fight Void is similar to fighting Bane, and while both Bane and Void are fully counterable, it's sometimes easier said than done. This is especially true when throwing other nodes into the mix. Plus, with Void's exceptionally high base health pool being multiplied nicely with certain nodes, it'll make for a longer than average fight, meaning more chances for mistakes to be made. But unfortunately for those of you looking for a new defender, Void has 2 fatal flaws. In addition to being a science champion, he's also got the villain tag. So with the current meta of everyone and their mother bringing Blade to attack, Void's potential as a defender gets drastically reduced. I would say it's probably still worth having one person in each battle group bring a Void and Hulk for diversity though, and like I said, these champions, they're not going to get kills every war, but they are going to sneak in some kills here and there while giving you those diversity points. Hopefully by now you have a pretty good understanding of what Void is capable of, but let me give you a quick rundown of pros and cons and where I recommend trying him out. Let's start with the pros. First up, he is a science champion. Finally a good science champion uses those Science Catalyst Awakening Gems and Signature Stones on. If you get Void, I definitely recommend Awakening him, and while his prestige isn't the highest, it's definitely close enough to be considered a strong prestige option. Void is an absolute tank, and he does this without sacrificing much damage. His attacks seem weak at first, but keep in mind the enemy is suffering from degen constantly, and your signature ability will double your damage. Void is useful in multiple areas of the game, including Alliance War attack, Alliance War defense. He can be used in special quests like killing Realm of Legends Wolverine or Labyrinth X-23 more reliably than Guillotine. Or how about that pesky Magneto in Act 4 with Regeneration that gave a lot of us veteran players trouble in the past before there were options like Void. Don't forget that Maestro with Arc Overload either. Where Guillotine struggles in some of these situations due to needing to time your special 2 at the right moment, Void makes these things easy. Void can be very effective against certain Alliance quest bosses, including Cable, Mordo, and Hyperion. Void works well in difficult quests like Act 5, handling nodes like Cornered without triggering the extra power gain, and works particularly well against Buffett. Void is simple to play. He might not sound it at first, but in most cases, you can just spam the special 1 and know that the swirly dude debuff is your friend. Void is also one of the rare champions to be immune to Incinerate, something that I believe will become more important over time. And the last pro on my list is a bit of a personal one to me. Void brings the exact level of depth to the contest that I'm looking for. Void strikes that perfect balance between being simple to use, allowing you to focus on countering the enemy, while having a complex enough toolkit to make you think and strategize on how and where to best utilize him. I love any champion that allows me to explore different masteries and come up with unique builds that are actually effective. I like champions to be strong in the right situation without being strong in every situation, being relevant to the game without making the rest of my roster irrelevant. And Void is exactly that, strong enough to matter and be useful without being too overpowered and making me disregard the rest of the champions that keep the game interesting too. I appreciate this design and hope Kabam continues to add this layer of depth and strategy that keeps bringing me back to the game. All of that said, Void does have some downsides to playing him, so let's talk about these cons now. First off, Void has a somewhat slow build-up time, and I think it's alright in most cases like Alliance War since it does build up automatically and it doesn't require skill like keeping a combo or building those poise charges. but the ramp-up time does leave more opportunity for errors to be made. Don't forget, for certain special quests, he does have that synergy to help eliminate ramp-up time versus Avengers, but there aren't exactly too many Avengers on defense in Alliance War. The second con is that he does need to be awakened with a high signature ability level. There's no doubt about it. If you cannot awaken Void, then he's really not going to do a whole lot for you. Third is that the charging heavy synergy with Hulk is essentially worthless in my eyes. Please change this, Kabam. It'd be so cool if charging his heavy did something other than Fury, like speed up his timer for applying debuffs, or if you're going to give him a Fury on charging up his heavy, it's got to either charge up much faster like Mordo's, or have some kind of built-in skill-based way of controlling it like Quake. Fourth is that he is a science villain champion, which, as I stated earlier, definitely hurts his Alliance War defense effectiveness. Fifth is that Void is better with the Resonate Mastery, which most people either don't have or don't want to spend points getting that deep into the defensive tree. Resonate is not required to play the champion, however. Six is that Inequity may be bugged. Theoretically, Inequity should work wonders with Void, especially in situations where you're facing unavoidable damage from Magic and Dormammu, but in my testing, it seemed bugged. I reported it to Kabam, but be warned, it may only be worth getting 1 point as a prerequisite for Resonate at this time. A quick note about Inequity and Resonate. I know someone will say that it's not a good idea to get these masteries just for Void, but there are actually quite a few champions that could benefit from these masteries. Take Archangel, for example, where you do want to be blocking to apply those poisons that will eventually, lead to neurotoxins and increase your damage output. Well, reducing the enemy's attack is a nice way of reducing that incoming block damage as well. So it wouldn't just be for Void, but at the same time, I totally understand that not everyone will want to run these masteries at all times, and that includes myself. My hope is that Kabam makes other improvements to the defensive tree to make these masteries more worth getting, such as lowering the requirement to get something like Collar Tech to only 11 points, the same way it is for Mystic Dispersion. I think even a small change like this could potentially have a big impact on the way that we view masteries. Going back to the cons, Void has no way to heal. You can be the tankiest champion in the game, but if you don't have healing, your sustainability for something like Alliance Quest suffers immensely. Something to keep in mind, though, is that 6-star champions are supposed to be getting a unique ability called Adrenaline, similar to how 5-star champions have the increased damage timer on their special 3s. And Kabam hasn't talked much about this Adrenaline ability, but I believe they said it would offer a small amount of healing or recovery or something along those lines, so Void could potentially be even better as a 6-star champion compared to some of the other champions that will move on to 6 stars as well. Finally, I'll say that Void performed quite poorly against the Masochism node. I straight up got my ass kicked in 5.2.4 where Masochism is everywhere. Masochism shrugs off your debuffs, and that's what Void relies on. In fact, he'll perform poorly against anyone that could shrug off debuffs. The one exception to this is King Groot. King Groot shrugs off debuffs at the expense of his Fury charges, sending him into his healing phase. And since Void counters this healing, and King Groot can't shrug off debuffs in this phase, Void actually works very well against King Groot. Lastly, to wrap up this review of Void, I know people will be asking if they should try to get Void from the 5-star featured crystal. And if you already have Blade, and you have a Science Awakening gem, because remember, he does need to be awakened, then I definitely recommend going for Void. He's unique, fun, useful in multiple areas, and has good prestige to boot. And in my opinion, Void is the new best science champion in the game. However, if you do not have Blade, then stay the course and continue saving for Blade, my friends. Void is awesome, but compared to Blade's power, versatility, and even prestige, Void gets left in the shadows. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.